In this video, we are talking everything running backs, from breakouts to busts to sleepers, risky picks, running backs you should target or avoid in every single round, and just the best overall approach for the position. But before we get into it, grab your coffee, grab your energy drink. We have a white monster. Take a sip and let's jump into it. Let's start with my favorite breakout running backs, and first up is Isaiah Pacheco, who is my dark horse to finish as the RB1 overall this year, and let me tell you why. In 7 games last season without Jerick McKinnon on the field, Pacheco was an absolute workhorse, playing 70% plus snaps in every single one of those games. He was the RB3 over that stretch, averaging 20 fantasy points per game and 20 total touches. He was an absolute workhorse. And so we take that information and can carry it over into this year because there is no Jerick McKinnon. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the only real threat in the backfield, and he's not much of a threat at all. Pacheco is on a top 5 Kansas City offense, could very well be the best offense in the league this year with Patrick Mahomes. Added weapons in Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, which makes me think they're going to be in scoring position early and often. So Pacheco is going to have the touchdown equity. He's never going to leave the field, so he's going to be the third down back. He's probably going to catch 60 plus balls this year, which would vault him into a top 5, potentially RB1 overall running back. And Andy Reid, in an interview a couple weeks ago, even gave Pacheco a vote of confidence, saying he's good with the protections, he's good with the technique, fundamentals, he can run all the routes, he's got great hands. So the head coach of the Chiefs is pretty much telling you, we're going to use Pacheco in a massive workhorse role on one of the best offenses in football. He's going to get the touchdowns. He's going to get the receptions. He is kind of flying under the radar, even though I do see his ADP start to creep up. He's an early 3rd round pick. I think he's one of the safest running backs you can draft this year. He's got a safe floor and an extremely high ceiling. All right, another breakout running back who I am just juiced to watch this season is Kenneth Walker. New offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb already said that Kenneth Walker has a 3-down skill set, that he's an elite receiving back. I think they're going to use him in this workhorse role. He's explosive. He's one of the best pure runners of the football in the NFL. The only knock really on Kenneth Walker over the years was that he doesn't get the receiving work. So if he ends up getting the receiving work, he has top 10, top 5 upside in fantasy on the Seattle offense that has a revamped offensive line. I think the offense as a whole is going to be much better because of Ryan Grubb. I think Shane Waldron did a terrible job last season. The offensive line really did drag down this team. I will say that. Geno Smith being banged up didn't help either. But I think all those things are coming together, and I think Seattle is going to have an elite offense, and I think Kenneth Walker is going to be a massive part of it. You can get in round 4, round 5 in your fantasy drafts. He's the perfect guy where if you take an elite running back in round 1 and just wait and then take Kenneth Walker, I think he's a league winner. To my next breakout running back, who I think is being very underrated, and I think it's going to be a massive mistake if you don't take advantage of his ADP, and that's Ramondre Stevenson. Last year, he was just set up to fail from the beginning on a terrible offense, terrible play calling. I honestly think Ramondre was hurt in the beginning of the year, and we just didn't hear about it because from weeks 9 to 13, Stevenson looked like the back that we saw in 2022, where he was the RB11 fantasy points per game. He was 13th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 3rd in yards after contact. Stevenson is a really good running back. He has a 3-down skill set. He's a really good receiving back. I believe in 2022, he had 60 plus receptions, so we know he can catch the ball. And now he's on an upgraded coaching staff, upgraded quarterback. I think Drake May is already better than Mac Jones. You can't tell me otherwise. They're going to be able to move the ball better with more weapons in Javon Baker, Jalen Polk. And new offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt is going to bring a wide zone run scheme from Cleveland, where they had a ton of success. I mean, Jerome Ford looked like an incredible back last year, and Stevenson has a lot of experience with that wide zone run scheme, as he ran it at Oklahoma, had a lot of success with it, and even recently said in an interview it's his favorite scheme to run. He just hasn't been able to run it that often since being in the NFL. So that's exciting news. All in all, you're telling me you can draft a running back in the 6th, 7th round that is going to be a workhorse for an offense that's going to be better than what it was last year. And besides, Stevenson was the RB11 in 2022. New England's offense wasn't great in 2022 either. Stevenson can get it done because he can catch the ball. He's a talented receiving back. They're going to give him the lion's share of the work because of the contract they just gave him. I'm not really worried about Antonio Gibson at all. He's more of a change of pace guy. Stevenson is a must draft player and the cheapest workhorse in all of fantasy football. All right, so those are some of my favorite breakouts. Moving on to sleepers, we'll run through these guys a little bit faster, but I'm really excited about all these guys. And first up is Tyjae Spears. It's really unfortunate that Tony Pollard came to town because Spears was looking like he was going to be the workhorse guy in Tennessee. While that won't be the case, he wasn't the workhorse back last year with Derrick Henry, and he still had a pretty fine season. I think he's going to have flex upside, and if anything happens to Tony Pollard, he has top 5 upside at the position. Spears earned 52 receptions last year. Spears best Pollard in every category, in yards after contact per attempt, missed tackles forced. He's the more explosive back. He's the better receiving back. So I think it's only a matter of time before talent wins out, and Spears is the lead guy in this backfield. Yes, Tennessee paid Pollard a lot of money, so he's not going to go away. But I think Spears is one of those efficient, explosive, Devon Achane light guys that you want to bet on, that if something happens to Pollard or Tennessee just decides to play the better guy, then you just got an RB1 in round 10, 11, 12 plus. Another sleeper that I really like is Chase Brown. He's starting to catch some buzz and momentum, which is kind of unfortunate because his draft stock is starting to raise a little bit. But Chase Brown for the Bengals, who is coming into his second year, who a lot of people just don't understand his game. He's not this gadgety, just screen merchant type of guy. He can handle the mail. He is a bigger back than Zach Moss. He's more athletic, and he averaged 27 carries a game in college at Illinois. This is a guy who can be a 3-down back. This is the guy that you bet on. Zach Moss is a journeyman. He's been cut from several teams. He had one solid stretch with the Colts last year. Outside of that, he's never come close to a 1,000-yard season. Very skeptical in Zach Moss. We're already getting buzz that Chase Brown is taking the first team reps. I think Brown is a massive steal late in drafts that you must be targeting. Next guy, Brian Robinson Jr., another guy. We got a lot of workhorses here, so if you want to wait for your RB2 in drafts and take one of these guys in the later rounds, I think that's not a bad idea at all, because Brian Robinson Jr. also has a 3-down skill set. Head coach Dan Quinn said that he's a nice receiving back as well. He's coming off a pretty strong year. His advanced metrics for Washington last season were really good, and remember, he was coming off a season where he had just gotten shot in the leg. He even said in an interview that he didn't feel like half the player that he is truly capable of at all last season. I think Brian Robinson is going to shock a lot of people. I'm not really worried about Austin Eckler. He's kind of at the end of his career. He's coming off a bad year. Yes, he was hurt, but I really like Brian Robinson Jr. I think he has a lot of upside on a Washington Commanders offense that's going to surprise a lot of people this season. Next up, Jaylen Warren. Yes, he's on Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith. We don't love that. But one thing we do know is that Arthur Smith loves to run the football. That's all he knows how to do is run the football. And yes, Najee Harris is still there. But Warren was still one of the best running backs in the league last season from an advanced metric standpoint. So, and not to take away credit from Najee, because he was good in his own right. But if this team is going to run the ball as much as we think it will, both guys can eat in this system. Next guy up is Rico Daldo, who I love for Dallas. I think he's going to come out of nowhere this year. We know Zeke is half the player that he was. He's inefficient. He's a plotter back. He can't really do anything at a high level anymore. I think Rico is a much better back in all facets of the game. You can get in like the last round of your drafts. Target Rico, who's going to be on a good Dallas offense, running behind a strong offensive line. I think he could be one of those guys that pops up week 2, week 3, and people are like, how did we get this guy in the last round of drafts? Or he could be a big waiver wire ad early on in the season. And then we have Javonte Williams, who I really like for Denver. People are hating on Javonte when we were expecting him to not be very good last year after he's coming off a gruesome knee injury where he tore his ACL, PCL, and LCL. Like, give the guy a break. What do you expect him to be? Electric? I mean, his injury is not the same as Breece Hall's. Breece Hall is coming off a clean ACL tear, completely different. I think Javonte has a major bounce back year on what should be a better Denver Broncos offense than it was last season. And then to round out the list, Jonathan Brooks, rookie running back for the Panthers. Yes, he's coming off a torn ACL, but once he gets ramped up, starts getting some playing time, I think he's going to be the guy in Carolina for a Dave Canales offense who just fed Rachaad White a boatload of touches last season. I think Jonathan Brooks, you can get in round 8, round 9, is going to be a league winner down the stretch in December when it really matters for your fantasy team. You can really put some of the sleepers and breakouts under the same umbrella. Like, I think Tajay Spears is going to break out. I think Brian Robinson Jr. is going to break out. You can call him a sleeper. You can call him a breakout. The moral of the story is draft these guys at incredible costs and thank me later. All right, on to the busts. I know this might ruffle some feathers. I know I've been talking about this guy a lot. I've been getting a lot of comments about this guy. Feel free to add more comments. I will clarify anything that you are confused about or give you more information supporting my case. But my first bust this season is none other than Christian McCaffrey. And a couple stats just stand out to me on top of a variety of different things. Don't want to drag this out too long, so we'll keep this condensed. But since 2013, only 2 running backs finished as top 12 backs the following year after leading the NFL in touches. So Christian McCaffrey led the league in touches last year with 417, including the playoffs. So only 2 guys were top 12 backs. You're drafting CMC at the 101. You're expecting CMC to be the best player in fantasy this year, and I got some bad news for you. He's not going to be the best player in fantasy this year because over the past 10 years, the consensus number 1 player taken in fantasy drafts has never repeated and has finished top 5 just twice. So in layman's terms, the first overall pick, you guys, is cursed. Christian McCaffrey has proved that he can't stay healthy, and he's already hurt. And not only is he hurt, but he has a calf injury. Calf injuries linger. They take a long time to heal, and it's very easy to re-injure them. We saw what happened to Burrow last year. He wasn't right for the first 5 or 6 games, and he's a quarterback. He's stationary for most of the time. He's not a running back. I'm out. Christian McCaffrey's 28 years old. The best blocker on the offensive line, Trent Williams, is going to be 36, and he's not even practicing. He's holding out for another contract. If Trent Williams gets hurt, doesn't play, holds out into the season, this offensive line is doomed. Trent Williams is the glue holding this line together. So mixing in all that information, I'm not taking Christian McCaffrey at the 101. It's like one of the easiest decisions to make for me. Give me Tyreek Hill, give me CeeDee Lamb, give me Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. So many better options with less risk, which when you're drafting at the 101 or the 102, 103, you're drafting guys who have minimal risk if you can help it. Another guy that I'm fading that I just don't think is a very good running back. Yes, he's a good running back for fantasy, but I just don't think he's good enough for it to continue from what he had last year, and that's Rachaad White, one of the most inefficient backs in the league last season, 42nd in missed tackles forced per attempt, 40th in explosive run rate, 45th in yards after contact. Yes, he had 64 receptions, but all of his receptions were little dump-offs. And I think that's going to change this year for a variety of different reasons. New offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen is coming over from LA. And as we know, Dave Canales is gone. So the system is going to change. Chris Godwin is moving into the slot. I think Baker is going to hit Godwin on those underneath routes more than he's going to check it down to Rachaad White. That could be very assumptive and maybe very inaccurate, but I think it just makes more sense. Godwin is comfortable playing out of the slot, and Rachaad White had a special year where everything kind of just went his way, and I just don't see that happening this season. Maybe that's not the best analysis for you, but I think this offense takes a step back. I don't think White has as many scoring opportunities. Losing Dave Canales is going to really hurt this team. I don't have a lot of faith in Baker Mayfield. He's not a guy I prefer to bet on. He played way above his talent, if you will, last season. I just think he's going to regress back down to the mean. I don't want a lot of guys on this offense unless I can get Chris Godwin at a good cost. But just Rachaad White is a capped guy who doesn't offer much upside. And he's just a very inefficient runner. You're banking on his receptions. And finally, he had no competition for touches last year. You had to pay the Bucs to bring out the RB2 or RB3 on that roster. They didn't want to give him the ball. They spent a 3rd-round pick on Bucky Irving, who's a good receiving back. Maybe he's not big enough to be in pass protection, but he's going to slightly eat into White's work more than the guys did last year. So for those reasons, I'm out. Another guy that a lot of people got excited about the second half of the year, and rightfully so, when Joe Brady took over for the Bills, James Cook, 8. But he's still a guy that I just don't like his upside. Mainly because he doesn't score rushing touchdowns. He has 4 rushing touchdowns in his first 2 seasons in the NFL because they don't like to use him in the red zone. Josh Allen likes to run it in. And they drafted Ray Davis, who's a really good running back. A little bit older, but he's good in pass protection. He might be a better receiving back than James Cook. He could vulture touchdowns as well. I just don't like drafting a guy who has his touchdowns already capped. And I don't see a way where he could score double-digit touchdowns. A lot of his fantasy production came in the passing game last year. He had 4 receiving touchdowns, 44 receptions, over 400 yards. If he loses some of that work to Ray Davis, you can pack it in. I just don't like drafting guys who are already capped, who don't have that upside that you're looking for in this range. So, not for me. A couple other guys that we will touch on. This video might be a little bit longer, but this is your one-stop shop for everything running backs. Comment down below if you have any other questions about running backs I didn't touch on, something you want to add. Leave a comment, let me know. The next guy is Zamir White, who I just don't think is a very good running back. He's not a receiving back. He's going to be on a bottom 5 offense that's not going to be in scoring position often, and he's going to be relying on touchdowns, which I just don't think he sees a ton of this season. DeAndre Swift, another guy who's a fun guy. He's explosive, but he's not a very efficient running back. I think Chicago's going to be very pass heavy, and I don't think the passes are going to be going to Swift. They're going to be going to Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. I just don't think there's enough room for Swift, especially with Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson being mixed in. Swift couldn't really get it done on Philadelphia, running behind one of the best offensive lines. I just don't see much changing. And then my final guy who will be a bust this year, who we already touched on, is Zach Moss. He's going to be this year's Alexander Mattison. Like I said, outside of a couple good games last year with the Colts in a brilliant Shane Steichen run scheme system, he hasn't been a very good NFL running back. He's been cut several times. Doesn't have much upside, no upside in the receiving game. Not very explosive. He's on a good offense where he might get some goal line, red zone touchdowns, but outside of that, he doesn't really excite me. He's a player that has bust written all over him. Moving on to my running back rankings. These are my rankings today. It could change tomorrow, but as of right now, these are my top 12 backs. And at number 1, we have Bijan Robinson. Number 2, we have Breece Hall. Number 3, we have Christian McCaffrey. It was really close between Bijan and Breece for me, but I gave the edge to Robinson because he is the better offensive line, might be the better offense, but it is really close. You could take either one, and I wouldn't be mad at you. Christian McCaffrey bumped down to 3 for kind of what we already talked about. At number 4, Saquon Barkley. Love him with Philadelphia this year. Jahmyr Gibbs at number 5. Not really worried about the injury. He should be good to go by week 1. And then Isaiah Pacheco at 6. Devon Achane at 7. Pacheco and Achane are pretty interchangeable for me. Depending on the build of your team, Pacheco is the safer pick. Achane has the more upside. So depending on who you draft in round 1, potentially round 2. I don't think you can get these guys in round 3, but if you're in a 10-team league, then you could. Depends on how you build your team. Let's say you have a safe wide receiver in round 1, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, then maybe go Devon Achane, who offers, like I said, a little more risk, but a ton of upside. And then at 8, I have Kyren Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne at 10, Derrick Henry at 11, and Josh Jacobs at number 12. I think Josh Jacobs is being really underrated, a little bit disrespected, and by me, early on in the offseason, I was kind of out on Jacobs. I was like, coming off a really bad year, but he's in such a good situation in Green Bay this season, running behind a much better offensive line, an ascending superstar in Jordan Love, a brilliant play caller in Matt LaFleur. I think they're going to feed Josh Jacobs in all facets of the game. Marshawn Lloyd has had a really rough offseason, rough training camp. He's fumbling in practice, and now he's not even on the field because he's hurt for like the second time. This is what can happen to rookie running backs. So that's why sometimes I push the brakes off on getting too excited about rookie running backs or thinking they're going to really eat into the RB1's role. I think Jacobs is going to have a monster bounce back season. Draft him in round 3, round 4 with the utmost confidence. Keeping it moving to some risky picks. These are some guys we already talked about potentially in the rankings. I still have them ranked in the top 12, but they scare me a little bit. I am a little bit worried if I do end up drafting any of these guys. First up is Derrick Henry. He's defied the odds for so many years now, and now he's in a beautiful situation with Baltimore. While the Ravens did lose 3 starters on that offensive line, I don't think that's being talked about as much. I don't know if it really matters because he had so much success on Tennessee behind a bad offensive line. And yes, Lamar Jackson and him are going to be an insane duo. But a 30-year-old running back that switches teams, the data doesn't really support Henry to have this monster season. He very well could, but he's just not the archetype of a running back that I love to draft, meaning he relies on touchdowns. He sometimes can get phased out depending on how the game script is flowing, and he doesn't catch a lot of receptions. So that's a little worrisome. Another guy I'm a little worried about is Jonathan Taylor, who the last couple of years, he's had some weird injuries. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. We haven't really seen it since his magical season 3 years ago, I believe, where he had 21 total touchdowns. He just hasn't really been able to get it done. And now you add Anthony Richardson, who's going to vulture a lot of touchdowns away from JT. Probably not going to check down the ball to JT as much as Minshew did last season. So he's potentially going to lose out on some touchdowns and receptions, which are very valuable in fantasy. That's why I have him move down a little bit. He's at 9, my RB9. I know that's below consensus because I'm just a little bit worried about missing out on the touchdowns and the receptions that I just mentioned. Another guy that's kind of risky but doesn't have as much of a penalty, if you will, because you're drafting him a little bit later. David Montgomery, if Jahmyr Gibbs just goes berserk, they could phase Montgomery out a little bit. You saw that the second half of the year. Gibbs was the preferred back in most situations. I think Montgomery is a very good insurance back, but I don't think he has as much standalone value as he did last year. Aaron Jones, risky in terms of age. Dude always seems to be hurt. He's on a new team. That offense might not be very good. Raheem Mostert, 32 years old, coming off a phenomenal year in the touchdown department, but Devon Achane breathing down his back. I just don't love a 32-year-old running back. Doesn't really get me excited. I think Mostert has a pretty poor season and doesn't really do much from a fantasy perspective. And lastly, Nick Chubb. Who knows when Nick Chubb's going to play? I know he's a round 10, round 11 pick, but I'd rather just take an upside rookie than Nick Chubb at that spot. So we're just going to whip through this next part. These are the best running backs to pick in every single round. Round 1, it's Hall, Bijan, Gibbs. Round 2, it's Saquon, Achane. Round 3, it's Pacheco. Round 4, it's Joe Mixon. Round 5, it's Kenneth Walker. Round 6, it's James Conner and Ramondre Stevenson. Round 7, don't love the options. Would rather take a quarterback here. Round 8, Javonte Williams. Round 9, Jonathan Brooks or Jaylen Warren. Round 10, Tajay Spears, Brian Robinson Jr. In round 11, Chase Brown and Blake Corum. And now lastly, what's the best overall approach when attacking the running back position? I don't really think there's a best approach, but there's some good options out there that I want you guys to be aware of. As you can see, there's plenty of running back value later in drafts. I don't mind using the hero RB strategy where you draft your elite running back in rounds 1 or rounds 2, and then you wait until the middle to later rounds to get your next guy, and you load up on wide receiver talent, get your tight end, get your quarterback. I think that's one of the most bulletproof strategies in terms of running back, just because running backs offer so much variance and injury risk. That's why I don't love taking 2 running backs to start the draft. It just elevates your risk a little bit. I like to diversify, but if you have a top 4 pick, I don't mind coming away with 2 running backs and 1 wide receiver after the first 3 rounds. Just how the value falls for the running backs at that spot in rounds 2 and rounds 3, where you can get like Achane and Pacheco potentially, or Derrick Henry and Pacheco, and then pair that with your elite wide receiver in round 1, because then in round 4 and round 5, there's a ton of incredible wide receiver value. And then if you have a middle round pick, there's some options here too. You could go Breece Hall, then you could go Drake London. And then if you could get Pacheco in round 3, that'd be a steal. If not, I don't mind just having one running back after the first 3 rounds if you have a middle pick. I do have a video on this that goes into more detail if you want to check that out. And then lastly, if you're picking at the end of round 1 at the 112, I prefer to diversify and come away with a running back and a wide receiver before round 3, where you could then go elite quarterback if you wanted, but at least get one running back. I'm not a fan of the 0 RB strategy. You could go 0 RB if you really wanted to, because there is a lot of running back value later in drafts. That's just not my style. I like to have at least one running back to anchor my team around, and then get one of these guys that we've talked about later who could drastically outperform their ADP. All in all, what I found to work the best, my rule of thumb, is to at least come away with one running back after the first 3 rounds. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you take your running back in rounds 1, 2, or 3. Just come away with one, and then wait, load up on wide receiver talent, get your quarterback, get your tight end, and then attack in the later 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds. Get your RB2. And I think that's the best strategy when attacking the running back position. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Comment a running back that I maybe missed, or a running back that you really want to draft or avoid. Let's make everyone in the comment section better. Like I always say, I want to help you guys win your leagues more than anything. I'm going to have a video coming out where we attack the wide receiver position, the tight end position, the quarterback position. So if you did get something from this video, please, if you could subscribe, comment, like the video, save this video, share this video on your socials, share this video with a friend. I'd really appreciate it. It lets me know that you guys are enjoying the content and that I should keep producing more just like this. That's it. That's all we have. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.